I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
Welcome to the show, everybody. The second edition of our Daily Drops. Glad to have you all along for the ride. For those of you who have been with us for a while, you know the deal now. Since yesterday, we have the Daily Drops. And for those of you who are just joining us, maybe for the first time, or maybe just jumping in after listening to an episode or two, happy to have you along. So, I received a bunch of emails talking about, people wanted some more content on the show. And yesterday I did the Daily Drop, and I'm just overwhelmed with how many people were interested in it and how many people downloaded it already. And I just wanted to say thank you to all you guys out there listening who download the show and who are enjoying it. I really appreciate it. It's nice to have you guys all here and all of us together on this crazy, crazy adventure. That clip you just listened to is still relevant 40 years in the making, and it's from the movie Network. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you definitely check it out. But the recording is just perfect for what's going on and what we're discussing here on this podcast. So I'm just going to get right to it today because, to be honest with you guys, there's NHL hockey on in a little while, and my New York Rangers, it's opening day for them, so I got to make sure that I'm sitting in front of the stupid box watching the New York Rangers begin their season. But anyway, back to what we're talking about today. Obviously, we're going to talk more about Jeffrey Epstein and some of the daily news. And it's sort of been a bit a kind of a slow news day on the Epstein front. A couple of things have came out. The New York Times had a pretty good article, shockingly enough, that was talking about how Jeffrey Epstein had made over $200 million since his first prosecution. So after 2008, he made over $200 million. Excuse me. It was a crazy startup company in 2012, but Epstein had no problem pulling in the cash. He had zero idea of where this money has come from, obviously. Even in this New York Times article, they couldn't find out where the money originated from, only that he had the money and he brought in a bunch of it. So the name of the company was Southern Trust, and it reported more than $200 million in revenues over 5 years, according to this New York Times article. It was supposedly a DNA mining service, a DNA data mining service. I guess Epstein told the Virgin Island officials that he sought a tax break from in 2012 that it was a company that was going to gauge predisposition to cancer by organizing mathematical algorithms. So, sounds like some Star Trek-y stuff to me, and it was probably a bunch of trash, but Epstein had a way of working people into his web and making people do what he wanted them to do, be it by having information on them, as we've discussed, or, charming them and having them believe that he was actually going to be able to do the things that he said he could do because of the circle of people he was always with. So, Anyway, that this Southern Trust, it gives a glimpse into what's going on with Epstein's finances, but it really doesn't pull back the curtain. That's what we're all craving, a pullback of the curtain to truly see who is financing this man and who is really allowing him to do the things that he was doing almost with impunity, because we all know that it takes a lot of dough for this kind of stuff to happen. And it wasn't just like he was just doing this in a vacuum. He was doing this with support of other people. Whether they were aware of all the activities or not, that doesn't matter. To be part of a conspiracy, it doesn't matter one bit. If it was you or I and we were part of a conspiracy, say we were selling illegal drugs, or we weren't selling illegal drugs, but somebody in our home was. If they raided our home, they could take that home. They could seize that home. But yet, here's Jeffrey Epstein after all the nonsense, obviously no restitution. He didn't have to pay any of the victims, none of that stuff. And here he goes on making 200 million, 300 million, however many hundred millions of dollars. And it just reinforces the whole entire two-tier justice system that we discuss all the time on this show. I know it's probably repetitive at this point and cliche, and you guys are probably almost tired of hearing it, but I have to drive that point home because it's the essence of the problem with what's going on right now in the country. So you have basically class systems, unnamed class systems, and that's not what our country was based on, and that's not what our country is supposed to be, and that's not what the Western world is supposed to be. And we have this corporatocracy right now where the corporations pretty much give the marching orders to the politicians because they're able to bring the most money to the table, right? So you or I are donating, however much money we donate. And, don't get me wrong, I'm sure the politicians are grateful for the grassroots efforts. But really, we know the bread's being buttered by the millionaires and the billionaire class. And these are the people that make things go. We know that politics is moved by money. And we know that in politics, if you don't have the bread, you're not having no feast. Because in reality, what you're doing is you're buying the exposure at the very least. And if I'm being cynical, in some regards, you're buying votes because you're promising things to different lobbying groups and different PACs. And, that's just the way of the world. That's how politics works. But this whole entire situation here is just, it's beyond the pale of the usual wheeling and dealing. It's just the type of situation where you have to take a step back and say to yourself, how in the world was this able to go on for decades? And then when it was exposed, how is the punishment not as severe as possible? Because we see it all the time. I talk about it all the time, and I'm not the kind of person to jump on local police officers, and they have a very hard job, and I'm very skeptical of most claims of abuse and violence. But we have to be, like Logan Ninefingers in Joe Abercrombie's book says, a man has to be realistic about things. And we all know that police violence does occur. And even in a situation like Mr. Garner, who was choked to death and died over some Lucy cigarettes, if it was illegal or not is not the case. The fact of the matter is the two-tier justice system, you see it well at work there. A guy for selling cigarettes is choked to death, while a guy like Epstein is let out of his prison cell to do what he wants, still has contact with the girls, still traveling with girls. One of his sex slaves, a child that he bought from her parents, allegedly, comes and visits him while he's in jail 90 times. He has, plainclothes dressed correctional officers escorting him so he can conduct business. And I'm doing that, in parentheses right now, because what does that even mean? We don't even know what this guy's business is. Even since we've unwrapped all of this, we still don't know what the guy's business is. So so he has this company now. This comes on the heels of us finding out that he bought that island with the help of Mr. bin Suleiman. And it just, once again, what it does is it it makes the whole entire thing just more odd, and it makes it more intriguing because there are so many different levels to this, and every day we seem to learn something very new, something that pushes the story along just a little bit and furthers the case just a little bit, but doesn't exactly collect the dots. And I think that if we're vigilant as we're curating this story and we're going through it and we're following it, like all of us obviously are, I think that we'll be able to find a lot of tidbits and a lot of gems amongst the propaganda pieces that they're going to put out and they've been putting out. And when the New York Times actually does investigative journalist work like they're supposed to, they do a good job at it. That's why it makes me so angry when the Times focuses on other things that aren't as important. So we need to make sure that these companies, these news companies, these media outlets, we have to make sure that they aren't leading us by our nose and directing us to listen to what they want us to listen to, because let's remember, they're all run by corporations, and they're all part of the corporatocracy. Even though they act like they're for the people, places like CNN and MSNBC and Fox, they're for the folks. They're not for the folks. They're for the advertisements and the money, and they're going to push whatever story gets them the most clicks. And you would think that a story like this would be something that they would be pushing hard with all the crazy details and the salacious details, and it's just crazy. It is just crazy to think that they don't have any interest in this story. So, anyway, back to some of the daily news that we were talking about today with this company he has. It was a very small company, this Southern Trust, that he used to get the money here, the $200 million. It was one of these like companies that only had like 12 employees. There was a man at the office told a visitor through an intercom that no one at Southern Trust was available to talk when they were approached about the topic. He was granted lucrative tax exemptions, and he was allowed to pay as little as 10% of the effective tax rate of the corporate income tax in the Virgin Islands. They're usually those breaks are granted to companies that agree to minimum hiring requirements and commit to investing at least $100,000 in industry and advances the territory's economic well-being. Currently, 71 companies, including Southern Trust, receive that incentive. But like I said, they only had 12 employees, according to this report. Government watchdogs have criticized the territory's history of light regulatory oversight. According to Jack Blum, rich people have tried to make it their residence and do business there. The idea was to keep it all out of the hands of the IRS. So, obviously Epstein, with all the money he has and all the black money he has, meaning money that can't be traced, really, of course he's going to look for a haven. And so he set up shop in 1998 there. He called himself a financial doctor, and he decided to settle down there after he vacationed up and down the whole world, according to the New York Times article. According to a transcript of a hearing the next year, as he sought tax incentives that were ultimately granted. During his extensive remarks, an official interrupted Mr. Epstein's soliloquy at one point to remind him he only had 15 minutes to make a presentation, during which time he discussed working at Bear Stearns and opined that electronic mail was rendering the fax machine obsolete. So this is the thing we see with him over and over. He surrounds himself with a bunch of intelligent people, but he himself does not seem to be the most intelligent guy in the world. So back to the article. He boasted about managing money for Wexner, which we've covered ad nauseum, and Wexner says that they weren't as close as Epstein says they were, but who gives somebody a $77 million house in Manhattan if you guys aren't pretty close? Doesn't seem too legit to me. So he boasted about managing money for Wexner, and then Wexner said that Epstein had misappropriated large sums of money from him, but he never took that to the authorities or anything like that, as far as I know. Anyway, the end of their association becomes evident with the income statements of Financial Trust, according to the Times. The company reported fee income, money charged to clients for services rather than gains from investments, of $66 million in 2006, In 2007, the year that Mr. Wexner said he had cut ties with Mr. Epstein, financial trust fees income was just shy of $4 million. In 2008, it was $100,000. So those financials alone right there show you the extent of the ties with Wexner and Epstein. So it's also a bit odd that in 2007 he cuts ties with Epstein, and 2008 Epstein is prosecuted. So we know that Wexner is definitely connected, and he has a lot of high-placed people in the government and officials in positions that are in the know. Obviously knew that this indictment was coming, and did he know previously? You know, these are questions that still haven't been answered. Nobody has, as far as I know, is even asking these questions. What we have here, folks, is we have a RICO case, and nobody's bringing that up. This is a clear and cut, slam dunk RICO case. All these people that are involved should be subpoenaed. All the evidence should be worked out, and everything should be put together and laid out for a judge and jury to see. And I don't know why they haven't taken that angle. Maybe they've had those discussions internally about doing that, but it's a very powerful mallet for the government to wield. RICO is such a large and encompassing charge, and there's so many different charges that go with it. You can really, really hammer somebody with a RICO case. And, you know, but we've seen it. We've seen these sort of operations get slapped with it as well. And it's definitely my hope that they use their power as the federal government and slap them with this RICO case so they can really, really bring the pain. All right, so that was the New York Times article about the $200 million that Epstein earned after he was prosecuted and indicted and served time for his crimes. So that brings me to the question, like I asked previously here when I was talking about the article, who were these investors? It doesn't say on the financials. How is that even possible? Nobody has any idea who these investors were? I don't believe that. So, like I was saying, I think that it needs to be on record now. Since nobody wants to come and talk, you know, voluntarily, this needs to be on record. They need to be subpoenaed. It needs to be a whole entire thing, because they need to sort out who's who and what's what and who the players were in this case before they're ever going to really, really be able to blow it wide open. And they have so much documentation, they have so much information according to different reports out in the media that you have to think that that's what they're doing right now. So let's hope that they keep doing this kind of reporting at the New York Times. This is good reporting from the mainstream media. I know I'm very critical of them most of the time, but when they do something right and something like this, they should be applauded for it. And hopefully they do more stuff like this, because we need it. You know, we can only do so much. You know, independent organizations like myself and other people covering the case, we can only do so much. Our time is limited. Our resources are limited. So it's a big help when places like the New York Times or the Miami Times or Herald jumps in, and you have people that really have access to resources pushing these people. So it's nice to see the mainstream media do the right thing for once and focus on things that truly matter, as opposed to focusing on just more propaganda nonsense. We have a very, very interesting few weeks ahead of us in this case, and we're going to have a lot of different things that we cover going forward here on the show, on the dailies, and as well as the tie-up show at the end of the week. And like I said, once again, I'm very thankful that you guys are all here joining me. I think it's awesome how many downloads we've been getting per episode, and how the show has just blown up organically the way it has. And if you want to help out and you want to get the word out, share it with your friends. You know, post it on Facebook, post it on your social media, share it with one of your buddies. Even if one of five just enjoy it, that'll help the show grow. And then eventually that'll make us, you know, have the reach that we can have the resources that are necessary so we can go on scene to a lot of these places. And once these trials start, go to these trials and, you know, bring you guys the news that you guys want. And like I said, feel free to shoot some emails to us at the show. And you can shoot me emails at bcinlv702 dailydrops@yahoo.com, and that's an email address that I'll be using for the show that you can send me emails for these dailies, and I'll discuss what we talked about on the show with you privately, or if you have questions or, you have leads, like I said, please shoot them all over. And, we're rocking and rolling, everybody. We're going to be... Every day we're going to drop one of these dailies, like I said, even if it's only a few minutes, and we're going to keep on this case. We're going to keep the news rolling. We're going to keep laser focused on this, and we're going to make sure that we see this all the way to the very end. Hope everybody has a great night, and I will see you guys tomorrow.